the other change that they revealed is something that we didn't know about, and that change is that in Catching Fire, Peeta will know how to swim. And that's really not a big deal. I mean, they make changes like that all the time for a variety of reasons. You know, no change, I think, is made when translating a book into a movie without a great deal of thought behind it. But what kind of got me riled up and got a lot of fans upset was some comments from Francis Lawrence that went along with this feature from Entertainment Weekly. So I'm just going to go ahead and read from their post or from their article. "We made some changes to Peeta's narrative," says Lawrence. "We manned him up a little. And by the way, it didn't take a lot, just little choices to make here and there. The story doesn't really change. His relationship with Katniss doesn't change. He's just a different kind of character. For instance, in the book, The Hunger Games kicks off and Peeta is paralyzed when the other All-Star tributes dive into the water. The option is for either me drowning or sitting there like a cat batting my paw into the water," says Josh Hutcherson with a laugh. "Either way, the visual is horrible. Easy fix. Let Peeta swim." So I really was not thrilled when I read these comments. And I think part of it is I've always been a bit wary when it comes to Francis Lawrence because the past book adaptations that he's directed, Water for Elephants, and I cannot remember the name of that other movie with Will Smith in it. But anyway, they're both known as being bad adaptations. I love the book Water for Elephants. The movie was visually stunning, but it really stepped away from the book in ways that, for me personally, didn't work. And then, what is the name of that Will Smith movie? This is driving me insane. It's that post-apocalyptic film.
I Am Legend.
Thank you. I've honestly been sitting here for the last 15 minutes trying to remember that name. And I haven't read that book, but I know that a lot of fans of the book have said that the movie is a terrible adaptation. So for me, it's like I've always been a little cautious about Francis Lawrence. So reading something like this really irritated me, seeing him say that they're making changes to Peeta's narrative and that he'd be a different kind of character. I have no issue with cutting characters. I do not care. Well, no offense to these characters. I don't care about Bonnie and Twill and Darius. I'm fine with them, not being in the movie. I'm fine with changes that are made. I really don't even have a problem with Peeta knowing how to swim, but just it's these comments about changing what makes a character or what makes a character who they are, and I don't know, it just bothers me. So I thought it would be a good thing to talk about because people have been pretty mad about this. I've seen so many angry comments everywhere online. So I would love to get everyone's thoughts on this. So first of all, why does Peeta even need to be manned up? I just don't understand why this is being presented as if it's a problem that needs fixing, as if being physically weak in some ways or being incapable of doing something, those are signs that you aren't a man. I'm just really not sure how to interpret this. Adam, since you are a man, I think, how do you react to this?
Well, look, I kind of feel like if you want to draw me into question, I'll use myself as an example. As we all know, the gender breakdown on these podcasts is not very male-oriented. And when we lost Sam Cushion for I guess the end of time, we're still waiting to get Sam back. It was even more so the case. So I kind of feel like, I know this sounds funny, but couldn't Francis Lawrence look at someone like me with this comment and say, well, Adam would look kind of, like a woman doing a podcast with a bunch of women. Here's our solution. Adam doesn't do podcasts. Or something like that, when it's an integral part of the character. And I think that, unfortunately, there are a lot of people who shun male sensitivity when, in actuality, it can be a very valuable trait, as we learned. It doesn't make – and here's the point I want to stress, and this is where the comparisons between Peeta and me stop, because he's a lot braver than I am. But Peeta is a wonderful person. I think we can all agree with that. He's selfless. At the same time, he's incredibly brave, and he's not even weak. Look at the fact that he can lift huge bags of flour. He during the training, Katniss says, show them your strength. He gets a pretty decent score of an 8 in his training in the first year. It's not like this is a guy who's a wimp walking around here. And I think more to the point, maybe, Savanna, what you would think and what I would say is that even if he was a bit wimpy, is that such a bad thing anyway? Why are we criticizing characters for not being strong enough or manly enough when we should really be tailoring it to how the author wrote them? It's no secret that the Hunger Games books are very, very popular, and people were just fine with Peeta being exactly who he is.
Right.
Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that is so wonderful about this series is the fact that Suzanne Collins does something interesting and different with gender roles, and I feel like I don't know. I mean, I don't want to jump to conclusions, but I just get the sense that for the movies, they don't feel like respecting that. It seems to me that any kind of thing that might make Peeta physically weak, for example, losing a leg, not being able to swim, they're cutting those things out of his storyline because somehow, if he can't do something physically, that lowers his level of manliness. And I don't even know how these things are correlated. Why does being physically strong or why does being physically weak necessarily mean that you can't be manly? Peeta, I don't know. It's just ridiculous that the term man up is even being thrown around. I just don't really get it. But yeah, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about this. Ariel, what are your thoughts on this whole thing?
I'm worried that I might be slightly controversial because, I think that in a book, it's very easy to, I mean, if you're a good writer like Suzanne Collins is, it's easy to show Peeta's strength despite his quote-unquote weaknesses, and that the reader can see that, okay, so he can't swim, and okay, he loses his leg, but he is an incredibly strong character. When you show something on a screen, you could do that, but I feel like it would almost take up a lot more time to show that in different ways. And while I would love to see every minute of every second of, Suzanne's wonderful writing be brought to life, that maybe there are some easy ways out to save on time and just say, all right, we're going to make him look a bit more macho so that everyone who hasn't read the book gets that he's not a wimp.
And I guess my question is, here's my question for you. Why does he need to appear macho at all?
Because he is a strong person on the inside. Like, Peeta's character is strong. And
I see what you're saying. So you're kind of saying that, for the audiences out there who don't necessarily, think as deeply about things, they almost need to see that inner strength reflected on the outside in order to comprehend the fact that he is a strong person.
Yes.
Okay, that totally makes sense to me. I think I agree with you. Cool. I mean, I kind of see all sides, but anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, and that's exactly it, that, his inner strength has to be made outer strength, and it's not my favorite way of doing things by any means, but if that's the reason that they're doing it, then I understand.
Kait, what about you? I know that you wrote an article, and I can't remember what it was called, but I think it was something funny, was it like Peeta, I'll make a man out of you or something like that?
Yeah, it was a Mulan reference.
Oh, but, now I have that.
Now I really wish that I knew how to swim.
Okay, I completely forgot that I intended to play that earlier, but I totally forgot. So you wrote an article about this, and your sort of, and can we just talk about the fact that they actually say in that song, boy, I really wish that I knew how to swim.
I know. I didn't even realize that. I genuinely had no clue that was in there.
So, Kait, your message to fans in your article is stop freaking out, that this isn't that big of a deal. And you actually have a point of view that I really appreciated reading about because it kind of calmed me down because, believe me, I was really, really angry. When I first read about all of this, I was ranting and raving to my mom and grandma. They had no idea what was going on. I was just really getting angry. But Kait, you kind of put it into perspective a bit, looking at Peeta in the first movie and maybe areas that he was lacking in that, I'm having the worst time articulating my thoughts tonight, so I'm just going to let you describe what your article was about.
No problem. A lot of it has to do, I think in this situation, a lot of people are assuming that they're taking the character from the books and making him this testosterone-driven action hero. You know, it's going to be, they take it's a totally different character thing literally, which I don't think it was meant to be. I think that Francis Lawrence is not a public spokesperson and did not word things in the best way. But I don't think he meant it as harshly as most people are taking it. But I think it's all about context. Because when you look at Peeta as he was presented in the first book and Peeta as he was presented in the first movie, you realize that he's actually a much stronger character, both emotionally and physically, in the book. He does show his strength in the movie, but only after Katniss demands it of him. We hear about how he can, lift huge sacks of flour, but only when Katniss tells us. He doesn't really talk back. He, kind of comes off as jittery throughout most of the movie, which is not the character that I really recall from the book. And I think what had happened was, in order to make Katniss look stronger, they almost made Peeta look helpless. And perhaps instead this movie will offer a little bit of balance to that.
That was a huge complaint concerning the first film. Peeta's character was not developed enough. You definitely don't get the Peeta in the book in the first movie, and that's, one thing that I haven't been, the most content about. So I totally see where you're coming from, and maybe what Francis Lawrence intended to say was that, they would just kind of be taking him up a level to match book Peeta, I guess. I don't know. I feel like he could have chosen his words better. But anyway, Jessi, what are your thoughts on this? Go ahead.
It's a case. No, I was just saying, more than anything, I think it's a case of really poorly chosen words.
Jessi, what do you think about this?
I actually agree with what Kate just said. When I first read it, I totally cringed at "we manned him up." That's like, what does that even mean, and why do you think this needs to happen? But the more I thought about it, I just think he should have been a lot more careful when choosing his words. Because he's also saying, we didn't do much, we didn't change much, we just did a little bit here, a little bit there. But then he says, the panic-inducing, he's a different character, kind of going back and forth. And I just think he didn't explain himself very well, and that they're not going to make these drastic changes to Peeta's character. And I think I'm just waiting to freak out until after I watch the movie and discover that they have. But for now, I don't think that. I think I'm going to be optimistic and think that the changes aren't going to be that massive. He just did not choose his words very well.
Yeah, I don't think that Peeta is, okay, granted, I haven't been in the young adult literature world for very long, but from what I've seen, Peeta is one of the most beloved characters out there, and I really can't imagine them making many dramatic alterations to his character for the film. I mean, I don't think they would be that stupid. I don't think that Suzanne Collins would participate in that. So, I've been trying to stop fretting about it because, believe me, I mean, this has kind of been troubling me just because it does bother me when people, look at men who are weaker and say that they're not, macho or not masculine. I find that very offensive, and I kind of felt like that's what was going on here. But, I'm going to try to reserve judgment, I guess, and like you just said, Jessi, like I'm going to try to not panic until after I've seen the film. One question that I have for you guys, or another question that I have for you all, in the books, obviously, Peeta can't swim, and Finnick saves him from drowning, and that's one of the things that Finnick does that sort of helps him to earn Katniss's trust. Do you feel like it's a mistake eliminating that from the storyline, or is it just what had to be done? Are you concerned about that at all?
I guess I'll jump in on that. I think that's the problem when you start making changes to certain characters. You know, if you want to look at a way where a change was done successfully, when you took Madge Undersea out of the first movie, the question is, how does Katniss get the Mockingjay pin? Well, look, they found a creative way to do it. So I think the important thing to realize is, yes, it's possible you can make alterations, but the more you start straying from the story, the more dominoes that fall that you have to keep in line. And I think it would take a skilled hand to pull it off effectively and keep the book readers happy. You might get the non-book reading public won't care and be very, very happy. And a lot of times that seems to be movie critics from what I've seen. But I think he's walking a dangerous line, but as Jessi said, let's wait and see. Maybe all that's going to happen is Peeta swims for like 5 seconds, and this is all a much ballyhooed about nothing.